thank you very much for the introduction, and thank you to the university for asking me to come tonight. I've really enjoyed traveling up to Vancouver, BC. We come here actually quite frequently, and I just enjoy your city, and every time we've come here, it's just been a warm welcome, so thank you. I wanted to talk a little bit tonight about the power of design and using some projects that we've done that were kind of come from various different aspects of our profession. But I wanted to first tell you a little bit about our firm. We are a multidisciplinary firm. We're 20 people, so it's really more like a studio. And we have, as Cynthia said, landscape architecture, urban design, and visual communications. And sometimes people say, well, I know what landscape architecture and urban design is, but what is visual communications? Tonight, Michael Reed, my partner, is here. And if in the Q&A you want to know more about that profession in general, he would probably be willing to come up here and talk about that. But he also is educated as a product designer, so part of the firm does identity and graphics and wayfinding services and design of objects and furnishings in the public realm. So we have a broad range of what we do in the office. It's a lot of fun. We've been doing it for quite a few years now, and Portland has been a great place to practice as a landscape architect. We do most of our work regionally, but we've done some international work as well in really far-flung places like Kuwait and you know, kind of oddball places like that. So I'm going to start tonight by telling you a little bit about our firm. Again, mountains are nothing new to your community and to your region, but we do have a downtown office. We look out at Mount Hood. It's a wonderful place to work. It's filled with light, it's small, it's intimate. I think we do some of our best thinking in this environment. It's an old building in downtown Portland, 1914, and this is our view. That's my view from my office window. In the foreground, I look at the Willamette River, I look at the cityscape, I look at the buttes, and I look at Mount Hood, and I pay a lot of attention to sort of what's going on around us. Oh, I just wanted to know who's in the audience tonight. I do a better job if I know who I'm talking to. So first of all, I'm going to ask, who are landscape architects out there? Okay. And do we have architects? Oh gosh, we got a lot of, okay, good. And I'll just have to say, are there others from non-design professions? Is there anybody that got dragged here with a designer that, and I appreciate you sticking it out. I hope I'll give you something to think about no matter what profession you're from. But we do a lot of work collaboratively with big teams. Are there any engineers in the group? I should have asked for that. There are. Oh, two more. Okay. Well, anyway, we find ourselves playing a role on collaborative teams quite frequently on large, complex urban projects. And I'll talk about sort of some of the forces behind those. And right away, I just want to say, we're all facing really difficult challenges right now. After working for 30 years, things just seem harder now to get projects done, to get them funded, to get them politically in a position to be to go forward. And we're, with global warming, climate change, call it what you want, there's a lot of forces coming at us that are increasingly complex. It takes big teams to do this work. It isn't just coming out of one mind anymore. It's got to have the best and the brightest coming to any given issue to solve these really complex problems. I love LEED, and I dislike LEED for a couple of reasons, but the focus on metrics on LEED kind of bothers me in that so oftentimes we look at quantity versus quality. So I always ask ourselves, what are we doing that is outside LEED that makes the project better, makes it resonate in a way that just the sort of scorecard doesn't necessarily reflect. We have political polarization. People, outside of Portland ask us, well, everybody's so liberal there and they all agree on everything and look at all you do and you're innovative and you're leading in sustainability and these things. Well, I just have to tell you, we have polarization in our state just as much as anybody does across the region or across our country. And it takes a lot of convincing to get some of these projects done. So we have to work toward education in communities to get people to understand the value of what we do. And, you know, as much as we all want to believe in the environmental values, I'm still not convinced that everyone shares that. We can never assume that these things are, you know, a shared value. And as we have to work toward the balance of cities for a lot of people that live there, some may disagree with your approach to life or your values or your political beliefs. We have to get past that and ask ourselves some basic questions. You know, how are we going to accommodate more growth in our cities? How do we enhance the quality of life? As we add more people, what do we give up and what do we benefit by? What role should our designers play? You know, are we, as landscape architects, filling in spaces between buildings, or are we creating communities that buildings become part of what our vision for that place might be? And then how do we improve our pedestrian environment so we don't have these two duking it out on the road, or maybe we just let them do that and we find places to walk and enjoy the quality of life that we'd like to see in our cities. I love the collaborations with the professions. I love the fact that we're always in projects at the very beginning, you know, beginning to solve the problems, identify the problems, solving them, coming back and going through a very tested process. Not much of what we do is arbitrary. It's very well thought out, and it serves a purpose beyond what oftentimes the clients define as the issues. So landscape architects, I think, are some of the broadest thinkers of these professions. We have these skills in problem solving and synthesis. We know how to look at the big picture. We know how elements relate. We have an understanding of people and how they use space. And we also have the ability to demonstrate this vision for the future, and we need to do it on every project that we have a role in. And then when we get out in the community, I think we need to work harder, at least from the practice that I see in Portland. We have to find ways to influence at a policy level. So many issues get decided in planning bureaus and at a political level, and are we the ones that really start to influence that? Do we bring up what we know and what we do to a level that demonstrates to policymakers and people who fund projects the value of what we have to give? So we spend a lot of time in public forums. We go to a lot of public meetings. We also bridge down to the grassroots level. So we find ourselves in sort of this middle strata between the grassroots level and the political level and the policy making level. So, how do we run up and down that scale? So I'm going to talk about some catalytic case studies, and there's 8 of them here, so I'm going to move fairly quickly, and I'm not here to give you full detail about any one of these things, but it's a broad range of scale of projects where we feel like there's some difference being made, and what do these contribute in terms of transportation infrastructure, green infrastructure, waterfronts, pedestrian environments, public spaces, high-performance workspaces, mixed-use projects, and social services. And then we have to ask ourselves, I'm really good at asking questions, why are they catalytic? When you work on something, do you really think about play the game like a chessboard? Do you understand if you do this, then this is likely to happen over here? If you move that entryway, or if you have this connective tissue through an urban fabric, what results on either end of what you've been assigned to do as a landscape architect? So that's what the sort of purpose in asking ourselves these questions. So I'll start with a pretty big one. How many people have been to Portland? A lot? Probably most of you. Okay. And so how many people have ridden on the light rail there? Just about every. Good. That's great to know. And we've worked on quite a few of these projects for the TriMet agency. In fact, this is some of Michael's work right here. He does furnishings, and even got to pick the trash cans when it came right down to it. but looking at these information systems in the landscape and what role they play and the relationship to the shelters and the paving and the landscape all around it. So we just completed a new project under construction right now called the Portland to Milwaukee Light Rail Project, and 7.5 miles, linking up to the Portland Downtown Mall that you've probably already seen. But it goes out into a community that's really, let's say if we've got blue and red, you know all about that in the US, the blue and red states. It goes from downtown that's very blue into a pretty red district, who is trying to get rid of the light rail. You know, it's already been approved, it's already being built, and they really haven't given up on putting a stop to it. So it's made for some very interesting public meetings and a lot of debate in those public meetings. As you as a designer, you know, need to be hearing everything that they're coming in and talking about, whether you agree with it or not. And one of the reasons I included this project was this ability of our firm to communicate graphically what changes that they're going to see in their city. This is a small downtown called Milwaukee, Oregon, not Wisconsin, obviously. And it's sort of like the land that time forgot. You know, they've never had light rail. They barely have buses. They have a cute little downtown with a little mom and pop, you know, kind of operations, and they're really worried about what this is going to do to their community. Yet the larger picture is, how will this enable more growth in their community? How will they not be the land that time forgot? How will they capitalize and have more private investment on the downtown side of things? So this is just one of many graphics that we did, and the reason I'm showing it to you is, for the first time, these people were trying to understand, what does this look like? So if you have light rail, as depicted in red, and you have a transit station, as depicted right here, and you've got freight, this one happens to have freight rail right beside it. What are the elements, besides the trains? Everybody gets what the trains are about. What other elements are in the community? And this is an example of these different wall types and paving areas where we didn't want people to walk, and using some existing standards of their own furnishings and trying to help them envision where these elements are going to be. So it was really important for them to understand the on-the-ground result, because they're a little skeptical, or they're more than a little skeptical about what this is going to do. But in the ability of showing them, so they go, well, these aren't so bad. You know, this is good. In fact, this is going to make it nicer than it is right now. So I hope they agree, when it's all said and done, that that's going to change their community. And these are watercolors that were commissioned to help them further understand. So, you know, you put the light touch on the heavy rail, you know, by showing them, you know, these examples of what, you know, the public art might be like. This is their station I just showed you. But, you know, public art projects, and yes, you'll still be able to drive here, and yes, there is, you know, community space, and yes, there will be a building here someday. And by doing that, it really helps not only promote these pedestrian environments in a town that really doesn't have much in that regard, and they can anticipate the kind of land use changes. It connects to these other alternative modes. We spent a lot of time talking about bikes in this project. And then it also allows the citizens to reimagine their own neighborhoods, and that's a really big advantage. So I'll give you another example. Green infrastructure, and I've spent a couple days in Vancouver now, and I'm still looking for more evidence that you're doing stormwater. I was asking Cynthia about that today, and I hope that that's an area that is going to be pursued more strongly by the city. And this again comes at a policy level of, are we going to spend time and money on this? Are we going to give water quality a priority in our community? And the fact that Portland has endangered species in our river, you know, Willamette River that runs through the middle of downtown, Portland has given a lot of attention to treating stormwater in even its smallest increment amount, not letting it build up a giant head of steam and going, oh my God, where are we going to put this? We start building it into every bit of the real estate that we can as landscape architects. So this is a project called the Rain Garden. I called it the Rain Garden when people weren't calling rain gardens, but it's the convention center. 5.5 acres of stormwater is collected and put through 5 scuppers into this, and it's a series of ponds that go down the hill. And it was amazing that this got funded. It was sort of a trade-off between, would you like a blank wall on the back side of the convention center? We know what those look like, and the loading docks are right behind here. Or do you want a garden? And they said, well, we want a garden. I said, all right, let's do a rain garden. They said, what's that? And I said, well, I've done small things like this, but we haven't attempted anything quite this large. But you have 5.5 acres of rain. What does it look like when it comes off all in one place? And they just couldn't imagine. So we broke it down a little bit more than that. And we developed a series of terraces, the weirs coming down and using the native basalt that we have in the region, and really inviting people to come in and investigate at a really close tactile level. And these are part of our environmental graphics efforts to, explain what's going on here, because people just walk up and they go, oh, this is pretty. And if it's raining, you go, wow, that's a lot of water. But it's actually doing a lot. It's cleaning the water, it's infiltrating the water in this particular area, and it was taking a lot of pressure off of what was once a combined sewer outfall, that was polluting the river. So there's a lot of reasons to look at projects like this, and they can really, they're not that difficult to do, and they really have a lot of drama when it comes right down to it if you concentrate that water. This is only 1/5 of the water that comes down, and this wasn't even a heavy rainstorm at the time. But in terms of a catalyst, it is a model for this, and people started going, oh, well, if they can do it there in that big place, I can do it at my house, or I can do it at an office, or I can do it at a school. And so it visibly demonstrates the stormwater, and it showcases the sustainable practices. Another project that I'll just mention briefly, but thank you for mentioning the Eastbank Esplanade, which is probably one of the, if not the most difficult project that we spent 7 years working on. And getting it approved from the political level was the most difficult part, and getting the permitting done for it. So you have wonderful waterfront here. Everywhere I look, I see a wonderful waterfront. But I haven't been in Vancouver and seen a place where you have I-5 freeway right next to the water. Something comparable to that is a huge barrier to access and to enjoyment of the river, and connections to bridges down to the waterfront, using sort of the attributes that were already there on an industrial waterfront. How do you capitalize on kind of connections and placemaking and people spaces in a place like that? And here's an air photo of just one piece of this. This is a floating walkway, so when there's a trail that's 1.5 miles on land in between the river and the freeway, and then the land disappears under the freeway, what do you do? As a designer, you go, oh, let's put them on the river. That's a no-brainer, expensive no-brainer. And it's about 2,000 feet long, and it's really enjoyed by people so very much that it's become an attraction unto itself. And this project, creating this kind of connectivity, has meant so much to the whole district around it. It's not only does it provide the connections, it's a really big factor in fitness, I think. The health and well-being of everybody. It's a social space. It creates all this awareness for the river. Some people said, oh, this is such a nasty little strip of land. It isn't worth doing until you get rid of the freeway. And I said, well, how are we going to get rid of the freeway if people don't know how nice it could be over there? I just took the opposite approach. And so it does encourage people to re-envision the riverfront without I-5, and we're seriously working on that. We don't have the funds like Seattle does to bury everything yet, but we really, really need to connect our city back. And then it also has been a factor in the development of the adjacent districts. So even though it's an isolated piece, future forward, the land is going to become very valuable, and pretty soon that freeway, just out of economics, is going to be, if not the seismic considerations, has got to be re-envisioned. So that was one of our thoughts. And then part of the environmental graphics were the design of these pylons, these urban markers with a light on top and a sign that tells you where you are in the city. If that old street would have continued to go to the waterfront like it did one time, this is where you're connected to: Pine Street, Oak Street, Stark Street. And then on every pylon, we've got these information information panels about the history of the river. And we positioned them in a way that you were always seeing the thing that you were talking about, never thinking just in concept, well, that used to be here, but actually pointing out photographs of the exact place that you could read the background of the photograph and imagine in the foreground what was going on historically. And then wayfinding maps as well. So I'm going to move on to another I-5 project. I sort of have it out for I-5, and I have to say I own a car and I drive it all the time. So, you know, I know what that part of the experience is about. But this is in Vancouver, Washington, right across the bridge from Portland. And this project was to put a cap over the freeway. I-5 freeway is going to be widened as if it isn't wide enough in places already. It comes to a snarl called the Columbia River Crossing, the bridge over the Columbia River. And this was a project to enable more connectivity to mitigate downtown Vancouver for some of the harm that's being caused in the communities and impacts to Fort Vancouver, which is a very historic fort and now national park. So this project is a land cap. It's quite large, and it brings people up from downtown into this area over in here, right out in front of the historic hospital. And this was a competition that we were in, and we really looked carefully at how we wanted to design this so that there'd be a lot of interest to it, and it would be that connective tissue that we all were hoping for. So it looks like this is a little bit cut off on the bottom, but this area was sort of the baseline in terms of redesigning the freeway so that you could get an under freeway experience of this place, and then putting the cap on to be sort of an abstracted meadow, an oak savanna, which is a common landscape right around in this region, and then building up into paving and types of connectivity pathways to adjacent properties, the landscape on top of that, and then finally artwork and water features over the top of that. So this is sort of the idea of bringing this idea of light down below to the decks beneath, and putting the cap in place so that people can move freely across. It not only repairs the urban fabric and provides that connectivity, but it creates a whole new sense of civic identity for Vancouver, Washington, who kind of, I'll have to say this, no one's from there, right? Is it okay if I say that they feel a little bit anxious about getting mixed up with Vancouver, BC at times, they always have to clarify, this is Vancouver, Washington, they'll always tell you that. And then it sets the stage for redevelopment all around it. So, and this is a Janet Eckelman piece that we were working with her on that really gave this fantastic sort of almost cloud shape or basket shape or colorful, kind of crazy thing up in the air that people would come and admire, not only from on the freeway, but every time that they cross through the space. This is a recent project we collaborated with Lori Olin on, Simon and Helen Director Park in downtown Portland. And if you've been there recently, well, everybody's been to Pioneer Square, right? Seems like. And this is just a block away. And this is a cap of a parking garage, 6-story subterranean parking garage. Vancouver has lots of places like this, but other cities don't, especially in the US. And I think the really wonderful thing about it is its scale. It's very intimate. Lori had a great idea of putting this large Civic Canopy over part of the space, and we worked with him in the grading to terrace this thing down, and then it's got a small cafe with a little green roof on it. We've got the, elevator and stair access ways down to below. And then a water feature here that when it's turned off sort of becomes a place where performances can take place. And we also extended the design of it out into the streetscape to the building faces on these blocks, so that it really feels more like an Italian piazza. A lot of people look at this and go, well, this is Portland, where's the green? There's not much green. Well, it also connects with the park blocks, and if you've been to Portland, you know that those are a really large connective element. And we wanted to take a strict departure from that and make this more of a civic space and use it in concert with the kinds of programming that goes on at Pioneer Square. So it's a really different kind of venue. It's much more intimate. And we've got a lot of green and sustainable things built into it. Not only is there a green roof on this small building, but there's all of the water from the canopy comes down into these stormwater planters and cleans the water. And then this idea of, loose furnishings just left about, and people adjust to their environment however they see fit, depending on how the sun comes into the space, or they want to be under a shade tree. This has really become a very popular place, and thankfully it hasn't taken the wind out of Pioneer Square's sail. That was one of my biggest worries about it. So it does connect the historic park blocks, caps a parking garage, complements Pioneer Square, but it really encourages that active nighttime use. And you can go through here at any time of the day or night, and there seems like there's something going on, even if there's just a handful of people using it. It's of the size that people feel very comfortable there. And it's surrounded by a lot of restaurants and bars, and it's in the right place at the right time. This was tango nights, and one of my favorite things is to see people dancing tango. Absolutely magical. Then this is another project type entirely. It's a high-performance workspace. So we've done a lot of work at Nike. They weren't on board for sustainability as much as they are now, and they're coming into a new phase of the company where they're really going to get started on a new program for their buildings to make some of the highest quality buildings in the country. But before that project starts, this is Port of Portland headquarters out there at Portland International Airport. Here's the control tower right there. And one of the challenges for this was to distinguish this building that really wants to be a very robust, active building, housing the marine, aviation, and industrial divisions of the port, bringing them as employees all together in one place, which has never been done before for them. And how can they feed off each other instead of working in silos? How can they collaborate? So it's sort of advancing that idea of having everybody in one place and having social spaces that help reinforce that potential for collaboration among departments. So we worked really carefully with the architects, but also there's a parking garage under here, and then the port headquarters are these upper levels in this part of it here. And then you can see a piece of the parking garage right there. So the footprint is very compact, very condensed, kind of use of very limited space out there at the airport. And then we looked at how can we really create identity for the port and separate them from the airport, which is only part of what they do. So our environmental graphics group and we as landscape architects worked on the entry to the project, but also the sort of super graphic idea of backlit letters cut out of Corten steel and using this wall to protect the control tower. You have to get all this approved through Homeland Security, of course. And they said, well, you put these big 42-inch barriers, they're concrete, we've got specifications for them. We said, we don't want that stuff anywhere near our project, really. So we took the opportunity to build a really large wall that I don't think too many vehicles can get through that. But it really extends the sense of this project quite a ways out, and it gives you, as an approach into the terminal, gives you an appreciation for a foreground of a really beautiful building. This is another view of it, and here's some of the hardscape work that we did. And then in the foreground, there's this sort of pieces of sheet, another Corten, to develop another vehicular barrier, but it's used more artistically this way in sheets that look like they're about to fall over. There's no way they're going to fall over. But really meeting the needs of creating identity and bringing this sort of idea of this workplace at the airport to, let's see, I'm losing my train of thought. I'm going to move to the next slide. Oh, this is just the entry level right here. And then above, there's a lot more work to be done. We worked on a green roof on this position and that position. So the entry is right down there, and there's the control tower once again. And sort of a nice, expensive green roof on this part of it over here, but more importantly, what were we going to do for the employees in terms of this sort of think tank space where they can go outside with their laptop, they can spend time in the sun, which we all appreciate, and be able to have some kind of an experience outside of the office, so that the ideas that they all have in the different departments start start forming around different groupings of people coming together. So these are some of the examples of how we worked on this landscape, very drought tolerant landscape. And also, I don't know if you thought about this or not, if you worked in an airport, but birds are like, ugh, they don't want any birds there. They don't even like birds of prey, which I thought attracting birds of prey would be a great thing because it would take out all the starlings, the pigeons, and now they don't like those either. They don't like owls or, you know, any kind of raptor. But so pulling a project like this off without using trees up above is kind of tough, and bringing it yourself down to, you know, what can be the simplest expression of sort of these mass plantings that don't attract wildlife, that all the principles you learned as a landscape architect to attract wildlife, you do the opposite. Monocultures, low things, you know, and that sort of thing. And then we also brought up the idea of the Core 10 coming in more at a pedestrian scale this time, and using these little outdoor rooms as places where people can congregate and, you know, loose furnishings to move their furniture around. So that was it's really a beautiful project. If you ever have a chance to get a tour there, it's really worth doing. So working closely with the architects again, they said, we want to do a living machine. And I said, oh man, that's a great idea. Does everybody know what a living machine is? It treats the wastewater, the black water from the bathrooms and, you know, the sinks and toilets and everything in this area right here. And underneath is a tidal wave that moves up and down through shale, and it treats the water. And I said, I'm really all for it. You know, if you really feel like you want it in your building lobby, you know, go for it. I just want to bring up one point that I think might be a problem. I'm not sure. They said, what's that? I said, does it smell bad? Because if it smells bad, I'm not doing that. I don't think you should do it. And they said, no, it doesn't have any odor associated with it, whatever. And it doesn't. So we worked carefully with the architects to develop this system of planters that actually steps outside the door of the lobby. There's part of it that's on the outside and part of it's on the inside, and did the planning design over the top of it using these plants. And it's just it's an amazing thing to think that buildings have this kind of technology, that, you know, that we can be, as landscape architects, part of this, you know, advancing this kind of technology in buildings. So I think that, again, if you have a chance to go there, just really contact the port. They are so pleased to show it off. They just are very proud of it. And it achieved LEED Platinum, but beyond that, if you talk to the employees, that's where it really matters. Does it matter to them? Yeah. Do they enjoy working there? I think for the most part, yes. And you don't get points in the LEED scorecard for happy employees. So this is a project, this is full disclosure for me. Has everyone been to the South Waterfront part of Portland? A lot of people have, some haven't. Portland aspires to be Vancouver, BC, not Vancouver, Washington. And when we were working on several of the towers down there in South Waterfront, a recovering brownfield area, we came up here for our field trip, of course. We wanted to see your tiny point towers, and we wanted to see the podiums, we wanted to see the green roofs, we wanted to see all of the amenities that have, you know, been done so successfully here in Vancouver. And so this is a project called the Mirabella, and it's a retirement community. So you have to be 55 to get in there, 55 and older. And, you know, the baby boomers are like rising. We call it the silver tsunami, you know. We're all getting to that age where we may want to downsize. Maybe we don't want to live in an old folks' home. That would be too painful. But would we live in a very active community where there's a lot going on? There's a very active street level. There's trails. There's people walking their dogs. There's kayaks. There's bikes. There's parks across the street that are, you know, beautifully done. And so this is another LEED Platinum project that we did with the Anchor Moisen architects that really brings together this kind of idea of community and social sustainability. And one of the things that we worked very carefully with them, we have green roofs at 7 different levels, and I don't know if you can tell how many levels there are here, but it goes all the way down to the street. So it's just like the landscape keeps going vertically on this building. And we worked really hard to say, where are the openings that we can insert windows so that people that maybe they aren't as able-bodied as they once were, but do they still appreciate feeling like they're part of the community? Do they still appreciate nature? Have they been gardeners? Did they leave a house with a beautiful garden that they love? So we're trying to put all these kind of amenities into this project as much as we can. Work very closely with the architects. And here's the ground level. We have Streetcar going by. We've got, again, lots of bike trails. We've got lots of accessibility, park across the street, green roof examples, water features, and sort of residential elements in a project that needs to break down this kind of concept of institutional living. A lot of these people have not lived communally since they were in college. Think about it. It's sort of like being in a college dorm with much better alcohol than you had back in those days. So there are some jokes about that. But actually, the residents are very happy there. We have outdoor kitchen. We have fireplaces for them. This is up on the 6th floor level, and this is down at the lower level, again, by the entry, and introducing vertical water feature that can be enjoyed from inside as well as outside. So this opportunity for dense urban living, it's hard to get a lot of Americans to think differently. You have it everywhere here. And we came up for, this inspiration. I kind of feel like I'm reporting back to you all that, we did this. And thank you for all the opportunity to look at work that has been done well here. And anyway, I think this, connection to these safe alternative transportation modes is great. When the people started first moving in, we heard that they were coming with more kayaks and bikes than they had room for. They had to open up a whole new portion of the parking deck below to accommodate all the alternative modes that people were bringing with them. So we think that's a good thing. I think that's great. And then the last project I'm going to show you probably is one of the most important projects that we've worked on. All these are all important to us, but this one is Bud Clark Commons, and it's near the train station. It's kind of on the border of the Pearl District, but it's in the Old Town Chinatown area, and it's 3 programs put together by a partnership between what's called Home Forward, or the Housing Authority of Portland, along with Transition Projects, Inc., who provides homeless shelter services. So in this building, we have apartments for very low-income people, some of the most vulnerable people out on the street that need to be sheltered most quickly. A lot of them have physical disabilities, a lot of them have mental disabilities. They really cannot survive out on the street, and so they're given priority off of a list to be able to live in this building. And then there's the services to men who are looking for employment. They've been clean and sober, they've been on the street, but they've turned around their lives to the point where they're clean and sober, and they have room for 90 days in this shelter to be able to go out and look for work. And if you think about it, what do you need? You need a resume, you need a driver's license, some form of ID, you need clean clothing, you need a haircut, you need all the basics. You need to be well fed, you need to be rested. So you can see why the gap, and if you've been to Portland, you know that we have a lot of homeless people, and it's not lost on Vancouver. I know that you have them here too. That this is a very difficult population of people to work with. And this idea of Bud Clark Commons, the third component of it, the housing, the shelter, and then the third is day services, which is all the things that help you turn your life around. So if you walk through this gate and you come into these courtyards, you've made a commitment to yourself to do something. You're not out on the street anymore once you've walked in here. You're in here to a place that helps you. So how do you attract people into it? How do you make them feel comfortable? How do you make them feel safe? And one of the things that we did was right off the bat decide that the gate coming into the courtyard would be a really powerful statement, and Michael and his staff worked on this with us, that it's a broad gate that swings a wide opening. It's not a little door, it's a broad gate that moves to the side and allows you to walk right in. Pretty soon there's no excuse for walking in. You can just go right in there. There's inspirational quotes embedded in this gate. And when it's closed, you can still see in there. So even if you're hitting it on an hour when it's not open, you can peer around and go, oh, yeah, I get it. That's kind of interesting. I think maybe I could go in there and have something that I need. So the gate is right down here. We organized this first courtyard like a series of rooms in a house. So what do you do when you walk in your house? You walk in the front door. Oftentimes there's a foyer, and maybe off to the left or to the right, there's a closet. So these people are coming in with shopping carts. They're coming in with dogs. They're coming in with everything that they own is with them. They don't have any other place for their stuff. So we have to guarantee that in order to get services, you have to part with that stuff long enough to go inside the building. Some of the stuff coming in is not acceptable. So, kennels for dogs, there's a place for, storing bikes, there's a place to fix your bike, you can spend time in here, and then underneath here are lockers that you can store oversized items. And then you walk in under this canopy where you can queue up for services. So every time you've seen one of these places, what do you see? You see the people strung out all the way down the block, standing against the side of a building, right? They're all out there in the rain, the sun, the hot, whatever it is, they're all out there. And so this idea of creating a place to queue up or a place to spend time like this courtyard right here, sort of take a number, have a seat, enjoy yourself for a little while you're queuing up to get the services that you need, and that you can actually interact with other people. So think about people that are homeless. They're so diverse. They're scattered underneath in some of the most unusual places. So we went out looking for them. We said, where do they live now? Well, they're under that bridge, or they're behind that trash can, or they're, in somebody's doorway. I mean, once you start looking for them, trust me, you see them everywhere. And so to bring them to the caseworkers is a really good thing. That's where they start to get the help, not in their existing situation. Otherwise, caseworkers are going out looking for them in the places that I just mentioned, and not only are the people that occupy those places at risk, the caseworkers are also putting themselves at risk when they go to these really unsafe environments. So again, pulling them into a courtyard, bringing them together is a really important thing. And one of the things that we were thinking about was, oh gosh, these people are really, I've not been homeless myself. I doubt if any of you have been either. But what do you need? You need safety. You need to feel safe. You need to feel motivated. You need to feel part of something, and you need to be treated with dignity, because a lot of people are really lacking that in their lives. They've got big, alcohol or drug abuse situations, or maybe it's a marriage that hasn't worked and one of the people had to leave and they literally had no place to go. Sometimes there's kids, so it's a really diverse population of people. 600 people a day come through here. And so we were trying to figure out how do we, bring people in here and make them feel like they want to spend time and they want to turn their lives around. We're trying to inspire them. So this is the men's shelter down below, and I just threw this in here. This is one of those, this is a lower level, excuse me, let me point to where it is. It's down in here. And this building comes up, I think it's 6 stories, and then down below there's the men's shelter. And this slide right here is an example of this outdoor room where the light just comes spilling down into it, and it just makes the whole space glow inside. And if you think about how you've seen, people sitting out, looking despondent, asking for money, maybe not asking for money, sleeping, that when you actually give them a place that's different than the sidewalk, that they come in and they start saying, yeah, I think, I do feel good about myself. I do feel good about my life. I do want to make changes. I do want to connect with people. It's just a huge transformational step. We did work on the sustainability side. This is another LEED Platinum project. Working the stormwater down from the roof down through the men's courtyard on the other side of this, the day courtyard on the other side of this wall, and then down in this wall here. And when it rains, it's just this sort of gentle sound out in that courtyard, acoustically, It has a way of, calming people, and they've reported back to us that they don't have as many behavioral problems among the people that they used to have. You think about what it takes to be out on the street. You're a rough character. If you're surviving out on the street, you are tough. You might have to defend yourself on numerous occasions, because even though you have very little, oftentimes it gets taken away. So to be able to put people into an environment like this that's so different from their street experience, we hope starts to help them establish new values. And then this is back to the day Courtyard with people using it. This idea of engagement, of spending time together, really sort of, we want to demonstrate this compassion and this dignity and promote this thing called social sustainability that's, again, not on the LEED. This was a LEED project, but there's no check box on the LEED scorecard for the kind of community that we're trying to create here. So with that project, I think I'll conclude the case studies and just sort of give you a little bit of an idea of something I've been thinking about. And I wasn't born back in this era, but to me, it looks like a lot of our cities were built around architects and their vision for buildings and cities. So a lot of the great architects also designed cities. And at some point, they started looking maybe more at buildings. Architects got very interested in buildings, and perhaps less so in the infrastructure and the cityscape and the urban design around it. Well, engineers, bless your hearts, but there's an era in the United States, and I'd have to say in Canada as well, that mirrors sort of immersion of the auto age, where everything became a freeway, everything became big muscular infrastructure that tended to destroy our cities, and the pedestrian environment wasn't worth very much. People didn't value it as much as they should, and the idea of freedom and movement was very exciting at the time, but it also had a tendency to destroy our cities. So I think now I'm going to call this the landscape architects era. This is my era. I hope that you think about this and agree with me that if landscape architects are as multifaceted as we're trained to be, and we work in these big, complex urban environments with engineers and architects and the political factions and the grassroots people, that we're really well positioned to start doing more than we're doing already, that we need to be going beyond the assignment of what we're asked to do by clients and go into sort of a mode of deciding what should be done and working to make that happen, even if you're not getting paid for it. That you're joining committees, you're part of associations, you're with the downtown business district owners, you're talking about what you know and you're inspiring people. So I call this a collaborative era, and I think landscape architects deserve to be at the center of that. So with that, I'll have some questions.